Hi guys, and happy Friday, and welcome to Friday 5. So last week we talked about a really simple trick for helping with digestion, which is just slowing down and chewing your food. And today I wanted to continue with gut health. I had a friend send me, actually, she tagged me in an article that I will post in this about gut health and COVID-19 mortality. So thank you, Pacha, for tagging me in this super interesting article. So the article is about a study, and it's called Study Links Fermented Vegetable Consumption to Low COVID-19 Mortality. So this is really, really interesting because it's what I'm always talking about. Like everything always goes back to gut health. So I'm just going to kind of read through the highlights of this article. An intriguing new study by researchers in Europe suggests that coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19 mortality rates. So we're not talking about just testing positive for COVID. We're talking about mortality. So actually death rates are likely to be lower in countries where diets are rich in fermented foods. And it goes on to say, now referring to the current study, the negative ecological association between COVID-19 mortality and consumption of fermented vegetables supports the hypothesis. So again, this is still a hypothesis previously reported, writes the team who were on this study. So they're basically talking about like how your gut health and how healthy your microbiome is, and how it's affecting the people who get it. Are they going to recuperate like very quickly, or the mortality rate? And what it all comes down to is like everything in all of what the gut does for your body. It has to do with your immune system. It has to do with neurotransmitters. Plays a role in hormone health, like so many different things. But the key thing here is your immune system. So keeping up the variety of fermented foods, and unfortunately we don't eat a whole lot of fermented foods. Like I think the majority of the people just don't eat a whole lot of fermented foods. But fortunately, in the past few years, I'm going to say even in the past like 10 years, 5 years, even more, the fermented foods that you see on the shelves of grocery stores have grown so much. When I first started studying nutrition and making my own fermented foods, there were hardly any. Like one of the easiest fermented foods that you can bring in is kombucha. So kombucha is just a fermented tea. It has a starter, and then you ferment it with black tea or green tea, and you add its tea and sugar, and the bacteria and then the yeast in it eats up the sugar. So there's not a whole lot of sugar in that, but it's really good for your gut. There was like one brand when I first started brewing my own kombucha, but now there's tons. Like I don't even know what all brands are out there now. But back to this study. So it's really interesting. What did the study find? Although the study is only indicative of the role of diet in COVID-19, it is, however, another piece of the hypothesis proposing that traditionally fermented foods may be involved in the prevention of severe COVID-19 at a country level. So what they looked at, let me see what countries they looked at. So they talk about how the outbreak in Wuhan, China last year had infected, the mortality rates there were pretty high, but and in Europe, the death rate in Italy, France, and the UK has been very high compared with the Balkans and some Nordic countries. And other similar disparities have also been observed across the globe. But what they noticed and what they started looking at was food and nutrition. And so the countries that had higher fermented foods in their diet seems to play a role in the mortality rates. So I just think that's really interesting. I mean, again, this has not been peer reviewed, but if by chance, there the role in fermented foods is as high as they think it is, like why not bring in some fermented foods? Sorry, my dog is like going crazy right now. Into your diet. And so, what are the easiest fermented foods? If you're like, what are fermented foods? They're just foods that have bacteria in them that have been like kombucha. So it's been inoculated basically with a culture. So yogurt is a fermented food. So, if you're not really familiar with a lot of fermented foods, yogurt would be a great thing to start bringing in. But I'm not talking about like Yoplait. I'm talking about like a plain, organic, good quality. If you have issues with dairy, coconut yogurt is fantastic, but a really good quality yogurt. You can also bring in sauerkrauts. There are fermented pickles, and those will be in the refrigerated section of your grocery store. So just, yeah, take a look at fermented foods and see what you can bring in. If you have, I'm trying to cut this down to 5 minutes, and I know I've gone over. So if you have any questions on like what are other fermented foods to bring in, I'll make a list on this video of the easy ones that you can bring in. And again, you can make these at home. And for those of you who are going to be homeschooling in the fall, these can be some really fun projects for you and your kids. So yeah, just really interesting article about nutrition and fermented foods, and again, the mortality rates with COVID-19. So hope this was helpful and that you guys have a fantastic Friday, and I will see you next week.